today the discussion is all about two very important topic and area that, if you ask me, it has been under-reported for quite a while. I'm talking about the flash flood and, of course, now the landslide. This is a disaster that continue to, invade Kenyans unaware. But is it really unaware, or it's something that has already been, information is out there in the public domain? Some warnings have been sent early enough. So are we just delaying in some of these interventions, or what should be the way forward? And of course, to help me unpack this very important discussion today is Professor Simon Onywere, Director, that is Research, Dissemination and Uptake, Department of Environment and Planning Management at Kenyatta University. Prof, thank you so much for making time, and it's good to see you today.
Thank you too.
All right, so Prof, there is, two areas that I will, first of all, I want you to distinguish between. I'm talking about the flash flood and now the landslide. So help us draw the distinction between these, two areas and how they are actually related, Prof.
First of all, the use of the term flash floods. Will we say that currently we are having flash floods, or we are actually having enhanced flooding? Because flash floods will be something that just appears and disappears in less than 15, 20 minutes, or even if it goes to 30 minutes, then that's a lot of water coming in. So myself, I will say that over time we have been receiving enhanced rainfall, as we are told, or a little bit more rainfall than we are used to. And over time, of course, this rainfall has saturated the soils. And then now much of the water, much of the rainfall is not really remaining on the land. It's just running off the land, and the water flowing off the land usually goes, or always goes, to the lowest point. Therefore, the lowest point will be the riverine areas. And from the riverine areas, it will flow all the way to the oceans, the Indian Ocean or the lakes. So what we are experiencing now is excessive moisture on the land, or water on the land, which is basically flowing and filling the rivers and flowing down all the way. And that's why that's filled the dams. The dams are now overflowing, and then, of course, any flat area will be flooded. Not with flash floods, as you say, because now consistent inflow of water into the plain areas will continue remaining there for an extended period of time.
All right.
And of course, cause damage in those areas. That's how water behaves. Water on the land usually will accumulate on the land, but if it is not able to stand on the land, it will flow to the lower areas, to the riverine areas, and eventually into the lakes and the dams and the ocean.
Okay.
On the other side, the question of mud flow and mudslides, you have seen currently, even before I go to the mud flows and mudslides, that all the water resources, or all the rivers are actually dark brown, dark red, or brown in color. They are all red or brown or some color that indicates that the water is carrying a lot of soil. So if the water is carrying a lot of soil, where is the soil coming from? Obviously, as the runoff is draining off the land, it's carrying with it soil, and therefore much of the water is actually mud flows. That's an extended quantity of silt or rock materials or whatever material it is carrying. So, and usually when you have excessive runoff, it will carry with it anything that is loose on the surface. And as it moves these materials accumulate in the water, and then they move as a mass. And when they encounter a barrier, they'll just push the barrier off or undermine the barrier. And the undermining of the barrier will cause the barrier to collapse. And that's why we see trees or tree stumps or rocks being carried by the water. So you must then imagine that the water has a lot of moving water, has a lot of force. Nothing can start moving water. And any obstacle on it will be knocked down. And knocking down of any obstacle basically mean a collapse of that obstacle, and most likely it cannot stand the force of movement. And therefore, for human beings, for example, you're just thrown here and there, and of course it ends up killing you instantly, either by drowning or by knocking you against a certain solid material.
Okay.
So that's how we look at it in terms of flow. But on the other side, most of the land basically has a soil cover, and most of the soil cover is developed over a rock surface. And what happens is that if the soil is not well consolidated, like we see in much of Central Province, much of the soil is not consolidated. When you dig through to find a foundation, you find that the soil itself is actually loose. A straight wall in many areas in Central Province will just start showing signs of soil collapsing. When such a soil is saturated with water and it has a slope or an outlet or a face with a steep slope, then that soil is moved slowly, a process we call creep of the soil, and then it shears from away from where it is standing, and then it will flow. And it will flow with the lubrication of the water, then it can move the whole mass, as we have seen sambas on land or tea estates getting moved. So it will move the whole mass, and the mass simply collapses into the floor and or below. And if there is excessive water, then this mass is usually carried away with the water, and it flows along with the water along the river. That's exactly what happened in my bayou.
All
We had
right.
escarpments, the water was running down, and then it accumulated against this loose soil. The loose soil was carried away, and then any other material that was loose along the way was carried along with it, including debris, tree stumps, and anything else that was uprooted.
All right.
Of course,
And of course, Prof, now that that is very serious occurrence, and this begs the question. Well, this is not something that we have witnessed for quite a while. This is something so new. If it happened maybe long time ago, and this is not what you're used to. What you are experiencing right now, as you put it right, is now enhanced flooding occasioned by the ongoing heavy rains that continue to be received in various parts of the country. But the area of concern is this flash flood and of course the landslide. Well, should we be worried as Kenyans of future occurrence of things like this? Should we be worried of such incidents occurring over and over again, Prof? Or what could be the root cause of this? What is really happening?
The flash floods, flooding in areas and so on, is actually not the first time it has happened in this country. Maybe not to this magnitude. Of course, we had a near similar magnitude in 1997, 1998, 1997 period, when we had the El Nino. We had similar incidences, although they were not well captured by media, but again, the impact that was felt then, in some of the areas, they have never recovered, they have never reconstructed those areas since then, since 1997. Now, what we are experiencing now is it's almost an occurrence of rainfall everywhere. But we do get landslides, mud flows, flooding occasionally in certain areas in the country, depending on the amount of rainfall in those areas. So even as we see this rainfall now, it's not raining mainly all over the country, but in certain locations at certain times, and therefore that's why we are having episodes along the coast, episodes in the Central Rift, episodes in the northeastern areas, episodes in Cherengani Hills, and so on. So these episodes are coming about because of excessive or enhanced rainfall in those areas. And we have had similar ones. If you remember, was it 2018 when we had very enhanced rainfall in the Rift Valley causing the opening up of the fault gushes in along Maimayo Road, and then the so-called Solai Dam collapse and so on. We should have learned from the Solai mud flash or mud Solai collapse that anybody who settles on the pathway of a river, if there is excessive water running through that river, it will occupy its space, which normally we refer to as the riparian area of that river.
Okay.
So what happened in Maimayo is, again, a settlement downstream along actually a riverine area, very close to the riverine area. And now that we had excessive water, of course, the water overflew that area and washed away anything that was on its pathway. We are likely to experience this again. Remember, I've said before that the Rift Valley lakes rose. They rose significantly, flooding quite a huge area of land, 2010 all the way to now. Of course, now that we are having this rainfall, I've not gone to the lakes, but I'm 100% sure that the lakes have been receiving a lot of water. And very soon anybody who dare to go back to where they were before, of course, they have been displaced again once more. I know that because we have seen in the media about Berkera irrigation scheme. The entire land has been washed away and so on, and therefore the Lake Baringo area is most likely overflowing its lake environment. So this incident of enhanced rainfall because of climate change is not the first time, it's not the last time we are going to experience it. We are going to experience it again. I can't tell when, but when it comes, there are always signals that just like we have received the signals this time that the Indian Ocean is generating a lot of vapor, and the vapor is moving to the land, and that's why we are experiencing the rains. Those signals will always be there, and of course the Met people are able to give us insights on what is expected.
All right.
So of course we will know what is expected. The problem is not that it will come. The problem is, if it comes, where will it find you? Will it find you in a floodplain? Will it find you on the pathway of a river or a flowing channel? And some of the channels we have created them ourselves, like in urban centers. We have created drainage lines to cause the water to move towards the rivers. But will it find you near those channels anyway?
All right.
Where will it find you? If it finds you near those channels, then you are done.
All right, and that's a very good question, Prof. Where will it find you? Well, there is what we call mapping out the area, so that before you settle people, you must first of all map out the area to assess whether it is safe for settlement. Well, just like you have said, information is out there. The weatherman, and of course, given the various factors in play, they do issue some warning, giving Kenyans information about certain areas that they have really marked as a hotspot, where they think that there could be incidents of flooding like this one. Well, when you come to the issue of settlement, now this is where the problem lies, because I believe before you settle people, you have first of all to map areas to assess whether it is safe for settlement, and all this, when you put this into count, and just like you have put it, Prof, that this is not the first time we're experiencing such incidents in the country. Well, where does it leave us as Kenyans, and who is sleeping on the job to begin with?
The first thing is actually there's information out there. The Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the Sendai framework of action on disaster risk reduction or disaster risk management, gives us a framework on what we need to do to prepare ourselves better. Because we need to prepare ourselves better and, of course, become resilient communities to stand any of these impacts when they come. And one of the things I know that the Sendai framework has spelled out is that we need to know where we are living, And to know where we are living, we need to have a history of what has happened there before. And then we need to demarcate or map what happened before, where it reached, and what effect it had or what impact it had. Of course, there may not have been people who settled there before, but now that people have settled in an area that in previous times has flooded, or in an area that in previous times a river was flowing through. So if that is the case, then you need to demarcate such an area and define what we could call your floodplain or areas at risk from flooding. Once you know that, then the next strategy is you as an individual, now I'm talking from the individual's perspective,
all right,
is for you to say that this is a risky environment in case water, or we have excessive rainfall, water might reach here, so I can't put my home infrastructure here, or I can't construct a road or a bridge here anyway. So in that instance, then you avoid such environments. But because we are not aware of these definitions, it befalls on our institutions to educate our people, to capacity build our people, to be able to map. Like now we are telling people to move away from areas that are likely to flood. But we are not telling them how far the flooding is going to go. Nobody has mapped those areas for them. Nobody is defining the areas for them. Somebody who is knowledgeable and understands the dynamics of this flooding should be able to navigate those areas and just inform the people, or with the people, learn that those areas are not safe for them to settle, so that they stay away from them. If we do that, then we'll be safe. But if we don't do that, then it befalls on the planning institutions or planning departments to also define the physical planning. Remember, when you have to build a house in this country, you go with a plan, you indicate where you're going to do your house, and then you're given approval to implement that plan. Obviously, if the county governments knew that your plan is going to be constructed in a floodplain, it befalls on them to say, no, yes, you have a good plan, but you can't build it here. And they give them a reason why they cannot build them, where they cannot build it there. But obviously, we also know that our people are also fond of securing freedom and just indicating that they have a choice, they have a free choice to make. So they have made a choice that they want to put their house there, and they can actually go to court and stopping them from building a house somewhere in a risky environment. So it's a very complicated dynamic, but even institutions and legislative processes spelled out what must be done and why it must be done, and then it is legislated. Then the courts will go by the legislation. But if there is no legislation, then the courts also go by reasoning and also based on fundamental rights of individuals. So that's why we need to be a little bit more interested in our land, our people, the safety of our people, and ensuring that they are secured by giving them the right information and by providing legislation that protects them.
Okay. Well, Prof, you talked about the risk management, and of course this might sound as the antidote that the country is probably missing. If there is effort to actually try to come up with this intervention, then don't you think maybe it's about time maybe we do more to actually to make sure that we combat incidents like this? Don't you think that the risk management framework policy could be actually the antidote that the country need as far as disaster and risk management, issues to do with this flooding and any other risk that might arise in future is concerned? Don't you think that is the area that we need to really invest more and improve on that?
Yeah, there are two or three things we need to know. One is that if, like now we are facing these incidences and we have faced others, including drought, fires, accidents, and so on. And you remember even the gas blast the other day, the terrorism activities, and so on. So we face certain risks as a country, and what it is that we need a framework that defines who takes what responsibility and what type of financing can be released and who releases those financing. You know, the funding to address some of these things. Don't think that these institutions that are proactive in terms of responding, and there's no investment on them. There is a lot of resources that is being spent on them. So the question is, if a particular incident happens, who is supposed to respond, take responsibility, and take action, and within which legislative framework? You have had a number of our leaders talking about declaring an emergency in the current incident, and I don't know why the pronouncement should be there when you can obviously see there is an emergency in this country everywhere. So it just befalls on us to reason that with this, I cannot just sit here and wait for direction that the flood is a disaster, when I can already see that it is a disaster and I'm vulnerable. So I should get myself out of the way of the risk that is facing me. But that aside, then which institutions should come and just talk to you even before the events happen, that you see where you live, this is you are likely to face this into the future. And according to our development planning, you can't do this here or there. And we cannot allow this to happen. And if need be, they can demolish it anyway. Because if the legislation defines risky environment and what will happen to people who live in those risky environment, then it will happen. But without that framework, we can't do anything. I had our CS internal security talking about bringing into Parliament a framework for emergency response. That's one component of the whole disaster risk management framework. The question is, in words we have the disaster risk management framework, but in a document we don't have one. That document has never been approved by Parliament. So the moment that document is approved, it then spells out who pronounces what, who does what, when, who finances what, and to what extent those financings can take place. And it cannot be an open check. It has to be operationalized within a certain framework, and it has to be operationalized within a certain management institutions. And those management institutions can be, of course, the existing one, NEMA, Water Resource Authority, KMD, or whoever has a particular responsibility to either provide information or take action in terms of defining areas that cannot be settled or developed.
Okay.
So in the absence of that, then we'll, of course, our people will be working on what they call thin ice on water. You know, when you have water on ice, when we have ice on water and we're working on it, the consequence is that you can sink.
All right.
And we don't want that to happen to our people.
Okay. And that is very important because every life matters. And of course, even Prof, as we went up this particular discussion, remember we are tracking two very critical components here. I'm talking about flash floods and of course the landslide. And this is an area that probably many people, they don't know the effect, the enormous effect that it has, and especially, but if you were to really assess the situation and the impact that it has to the livelihood of people, then the story about the Mai Mai tragedy is something that should awaken your thoughts and of course send a little bit of shivers down your veins. And of course, this is a very key discussion, and it's a good discussion at this particular time that the country is facing floods. And of course, Prof, even as you end up this discussion, now we have highlighted the issues and of course the cause and everything in between. But now, what is the way forward? How should we move on as a nation to combat such incidents from occurring ever again?
in regard to water, remember there are many other risks. So today we are just talking about water. In regard to water, water will always flow to the lowest point, and water will always stop at a flat plane, and the water will always accumulate in a depression. So at the moment, you see, if you think about it, all our irrigation schemes in this country are in a flat plain. Of course, we talk of flood plain because they get flooded occasionally, but they are literally flat in terms of just like a table, a flat table, as a flat surface. But even within a flat surface, there will always be depressions, and those depressions usually first fill with the water. The water runs to the depressions, fills the depressions before it flows out. So that's the first thing we need to understand, that water will always flow to a lowland area, and it will always flow to a flat plain, whether that flat plain is on top of a hill or wherever. The water will always go into that flat plain, and if there is a depression there, it will first fill the depression before it flows out. And once it fills the depression and then starts flowing out, it will find a channel. If it doesn't get a channel, it will dig one. So if it digs one, then that channel will continue to increase in depth and size, and most likely undermine the banks, and the consequence of it is that it will start carrying debris and rock materials and other things down the river. And obviously, should you be on this pathway, or should there be a bridge along the way, usually these materials knock down those bridges or block the bridges, and the water overflows. And most of the time we have seen our people are not reasonable. They try to close rivers that are flooded, and we have seen the consequences. That's the first thing we need to know, that the water will always flow into a flat area. The second thing we need to know is that if you live in a slope, if you live on a slope, the slope is likely to give way in one way or another. It could be a loose rock that is standing on the slope. It could be just a whole mass of materials that is sitting on a slope. Most of these slopes have an underlying rock, so they will always dislodge these materials, and the material will flow down. And therefore, the warning to our people is that they should know where they live. They should they should map it. They should understand it, and at all costs avoid the pathways of waters or where water will accumulate. The reason why we are saying that they must evacuate the areas and stay in safer areas. But not now when it is raining. This is what should be a lifetime options that I don't construct in areas that are going to get flooded.
Well, Prof, I'm afraid that is the time we had today. Many thanks, of course, for shedding some light on this very important topic. And of course, remember, we are talking about matters flash flood and of course landslide. All this, it comes in line with the ongoing floods that is being experienced in different parts of the country that has claimed lives, and of course properties have been destroyed, and of course houses submerged, others marooned, and that is the sad current state of affairs that we find ourselves in as a country. Now let's move on, and of course, Prof, thank you so much. That is Professor Simon Onywere, Director Research, Dissemination and Uptake, Department of Environmental Planning and Management at Kenyatta University.